Welcome back. Navy shipyards see delays on about 3/4 of maintenance on aircraft carriers and submarines. Unplanned work is one of the main causes of delays. Diana Maurer is Director of Defense Capabilities and Management Issues, the Government Accountability Office. Diana, welcome back. Thanks for coming back on the program. You know I'm a huge fan of the highlights pages of the work that you and your colleagues do at GAO. And on this one, you write under why you did this work. Navy spent $2.8 billion in capital investments to address shipyard performance, among other things, in fiscal 15 through 19. However, the shipyards continue to face persistent and substantial maintenance delays. Is one connected to the other, or are those coincidental facts that you were able to use as the basis of your work?
So it turns out that there are a number of reasons why the Navy has been consistently late in completing planned maintenance. And our report was focused specifically on aircraft carriers and submarines. Certainly one of the factors that we looked at 10 different factors, involved the facilities themselves. We've issued prior reports on that. But it turns out that the two main factors that we identified as part of our analysis were was the existence of unplanned work, right? The Navy goes to great lengths to try to plan in advance what it's going to do when it repairs submarines and aircraft carriers. When they bring them into port, they find extra things that need to be fixed. The second major factor has to do with workforce, which means either not having enough of the right people or not having people who are sufficiently trained to do the work properly.
So that, I guess I read it right then, because the two notes that I scribbled are, is this an issue of poor planning or an issue of poor execution? It sounds like the answer is yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes. And I think it is important to point out that this planned maintenance that we're talking about is tremendously complicated. You know, you're talking about doing substantial overhauls to submarines and aircraft carriers. The work as planned typically takes anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. It involves hundreds and typically thousands of people. So the Navy starts planning for this 30 months before a submarine or an aircraft carrier goes into port. So there are a lot of complicated moving parts involving people, parts, facilities, equipment. So there are many places where it can potentially go off the rails. And unfortunately, we found that 75% of the time it does do that, and the Navy completes the maintenance later than planned.
Did you find specific issues with the planning process where the Navy maybe didn't account for, it didn't give itself extra bandwidth, or didn't anticipate correctly how long a particular type of maintenance or group of types of maintenance would take, or are the problems more broad than that, Diana?
So it's a combination of both. One area in particular we found where the Navy didn't plan properly was in the amount of time that it planned on completing the work. They underestimated the amount of work hours that it would be necessary to complete the work by about 36%. That's substantial, because when you're talking about over a period of 5 years, it's 3 or 4 million work hours. So that's a lot. To help fill that gap, the Navy the shipyards in particular relied on excessive use of overtime. That puts a strain on an already strained workforce. So when people are working consistently on an overtime basis for months and years at a time, it's not surprising that in some cases the quality of the work is going to suffer.
You write about the Navy's structure to tie these issues together, Diana, and you write, the Navy initiated the Shipyard Performance to Plan Initiative in the fall of 2018. That hasn't turned out the way that the Navy anticipated it either, has it?
That's still underway, and on the plus side, we do want to give the Navy credit for coming up with this approach. We think it is very important, but they're still in the relatively early stages of a process. Like, among other things, they're diving into the way they go about planning and executing maintenance for aircraft carriers and submarines. They're looking at the different ways to measure that progress. We found that they'd only completed about half of those planned measures, and they still hadn't linked those measures to goals, to action plans, nor had they set up a monitoring process in place to ensure that senior leadership was getting the necessary momentum behind the effort to see it through to successful completion.
But it sounds like when they do reach those points, it will be a tool that you believe will be useful to them to solve some of the problems that you're assessing right now. Is that a fair read on my part?
Absolutely. If P2P, if performance to plan, P2P, which is what the Navy refers to it as, is successfully implemented and incorporates what we recommended in our report, which was developing goals and measures and action plans and a monitoring mechanism, it will certainly help the Navy address this critical problem with being chronically late in performing maintenance on aircraft carriers and submarines.
We have about 30 seconds left, Diana. Do you know a timeline? Is there a timeline for getting that plan into place? And does that work, in your view, with what the Navy needs to accomplish?
So the Navy is working on this. They said that they've agreed with our recommendations. They don't have a specific timeline yet. I do know that this has a great level of attention at the highest levels of the Navy, because when ships and submarines are late coming out of maintenance, they're not available for training, they're not available for operational missions, and our national security is therefore impacted.
Diana Maurer, thanks very much for joining me again. It's great to have you back.
Thank you very much.